Now, what is Buddhist science? Quote unquote science. I want to tell a little anecdote of a former student of mine who has since become a professor. He sneaked up on me in a conference, and he said to me, "Bob, I'm sorry, there is no Buddhist science." I said, "What? What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, in Buddhism there's no theory revision," is what he said. And I know he was referring to the idea, then he ran away, so I couldn't reject him, refute his statement. But I know what he meant, because the idea being that someone had rejected to him the idea of Buddhism having science by saying that, well, it's based on someone who became all-knowing, the Buddha. He became like the ideal of a scientist, which is someone who actually knows reality, knows what it is. Like if Einstein had actually known how gravity fits with electromagnetism in an experiential, complete insight, that would be the ideal of science. But actually materialist science, because it thinks reality is just a bunch of quantities, material quantities, obviously there's never any end to counting all the infinite material quantities. So they have a preconceived idea that, oh, you learn a little bit about something, you can't learn about everything, so therefore you're always going to revise your theories and get more data, more information about the quantities, and you'll add, so that's the idea. Whereas actually, Buddha taught an experience-based philosophical metaphysics. And don't think metaphysics is just woo-woo. Metaphysics means the nature of reality, that branch of philosophy in the old days, and a material physics that posited a universal relativity, grounded in the discovery of the voidness of any supposed non-relative absolute. And what this means is that Einstein's great breakthrough thing, for which he has celebrated, relativity, was even more thoroughgoingly discovered by Buddha, in that he looked at the idea of an absolute God, he looked at the idea of an absolute essence of any phenomenon, he looked at the idea of some sort of absolute energy or absolute matter, and he discovered that there is no such thing as an absolute, in a way, and therefore he called the absolute that emptiness of the universe of any supposed absolute. And that means that the relationality of everything is equivalent to the absolute, since there's nothing outside of it. And this is considered a fabulous remedy for the inner feeling that we have, that there's something about us that is apart from everything else, that never changes. It's always our unchanging sort of soul or essence or mind or something. Or in the case of materialists who have rejected that rightly, they think that the nothingness inside themselves is an absolute, and that's where they go when they die. They just cease to exist. And so in a way, it's like a place that they think they go to. So that has become their absolute, because they still haven't really had the insight of what the Buddhists would call the emptiness of nothingness, which means that nothingness itself has no absolute essence, and it's only an arbitrary word that has no actual referent, indeed, you know. So this is very, very key. This is the key of the Buddha's insight. And it's surprising to us, because we would not think that if we realized there was no way to get out of this relativity, and if we viscerally accepted being completely engaged in this relativity, that we would experience the relativity as a blissful thing, as a wonderful thing. No problem. Even we could deal with some seemingly things that others would think of as negative. We can absorb them easily with drawing resources from the infinity of the relativity. Something like that. Although again, remember, anything I say will not be complete because it is indescribable. Second, the Buddha taught a systematized biology, a theory of evolution of body, matter, speech, information, and mind, subtle energy, through ethical actions of body, speech, and mind. He transvalued the prior Vedic word of karma, which had been meaning for Vedas, the ritual action that determines one's fate by propitiating the gods to receive their help and avoid their harm. And they were quite frightened of the Vedic gods, who could be very severe. They were like Old Testament type of fierce deities. Rather, he taught it to be the causal processes of one's own individual ethical or unethical actions, including verbal and mental actions, that are the determinants of one's fate. So action, what you do makes what you be the way it is, basically. In other words, was his insight. And that's what determines your fate and predominates over the physical genes of your species or parents in shaping your form of life and your embodiments even in life after life. And there's no end to this process because of the kind of a pre-modern version of the law of the conservation of energy that no energy is ever destroyed, no energy can ever become nothing. It is something, and the mind is just a very subtle energy, and it therefore cannot also become nothing, or cannot have been nothing from the beginning. And therefore, you're stuck in this infinite world, and if you don't understand what it is, you're going to suffer. But if you do, you're not going to suffer. This then makes your realistic motivation to use your human intelligence to discover that. So third, the Buddha also taught, so he had a physics of relativity, voidness and relativity. He had a biology of your action as shaping your destiny and your life, rather than the gods, which is an anti-religious revolution, actually. A pre-17th century Western Enlightenment, 500 BC Eastern Enlightenment. And then C, he taught a sophisticated psychology, calling it inner science, the king or queen of the sciences, since the understanding of the subtle causal processes that shape the individual mind is indispensable in ameliorating the quality of the lives of the sentient beings. And here there's a wonderful verse by a great Buddhist scholar, writer, adept called Shantideva, where he says, if you don't like walking barefoot on the world, because you might step on sharp things, thorns and broken glass and rocks and things, you have two choices. One, you can cover the world entirely with leather, make it a suede planet, and walk very softly everywhere. Or you can make yourself a pair of sandals. This is really wonderful, because this is why Buddhist science, from the beginning, made psychology the most important science. Because the way your mind is like the sole of the sandal. If your mind is adaptable to any situation and can make the best of it, even seemingly adverse situations, then you're going to have a happy time. If you have in good circumstances, you're wealthy, people are like you, it's happy, it's nice around, but you get in a bad mood and your mind is in a bad mood, you're going to have a miserable time. So the mind determines really very much your reactions to things determine the quality of your experience of them. And this was why Buddhist science focused especially on psychology, and is appalled at the idea of people thinking that a realistic science is going to act and live and work in denial of even the existence of the mind of the scientists themselves. That's just considered lunacy, because their minds are the ones that are being the scientists and making the judgments and the theories and the mathematics and everything. And so I don't have one. It's just completely self-denial in a way, really. The monasteries that the Buddha founded for the community of male and female mendicant monks and nuns who undertook the super educations, remember, ethics, mind, and wisdom, became the core of the great universities of India that also taught the outer sciences, and their roots in linguistics, logic, mathematics, astronomy, and medicine, all branching into botany, agriculture, engineering, architecture, law, music, drama, and literature. So these were marvelous universities during the time we had dark ages in the West, in Europe. In India, they had no such dark age until they were conquered by Westerners. In the first case, Muslim Westerners. In the second case, Christian and secularist Westerners. So how did the super educations work in practice? Scientific wisdom knowledge leads away from suffering to bliss, since it discovers that reality itself is the bliss of total freedom from suffering. Nirvana, the third noble truth, is the only real reality, according to Buddhist science. The other three noble truths, that is to say, suffering, its causes, and the path to freedom from it, those bad things, the good things, bad and good, but still they are only relative realities. They are not totally inexistent, of course, but they are just a lesser reality, luckily, and a somewhat less real than the real reality, which is Nirvana itself, which is everything ultimately. Truth is to be tested by inference and experience both, and known for oneself. Inference, realistic inference and accurate inference is considered really important. Theory is very important, of course, but experience outweighs it, and the theory only leads to experience, and then experience goes beyond theory and inference. But that doesn't mean that theory and inference are not important. Many people misunderstand Buddhism to think that don't have any theories, don't think anything, don't use your mind in proper reasoning and inference. And that, of course, is totally wrong understanding. Inference is essential, and And it leads to experience, although then experience will go beyond whatever formula inference is using to aim the mind at valid reality. For many centuries, the Buddhist word for, quote, Buddhism, even in India, was simply inner scientist, a nangma, an adhyatmika, an inner person. That was what a Buddhist was called.